Hi, welcome to testautomation.org. My name is Rafael, and I will walk you through how to understand a little bit more about Selenium and how Selenium interact with different elements within a web page. So let's get started, and a little bit more about this agenda or what you will be learning with me on this session. So let's start by looking at what is an element, and the next item on the list is what are locators, or what are the different strategies that Selenium use to locate and interact with different elements within a website. Cool. So most likely everyone has landed on a website where they are asking you for a username and password. Let's look at each one of these components more in detail. So this particular site contains a text box, a login button, and if we introduce a wrong username or password, we may have error message text saying that, hey, your username and password doesn't actually match whatever we have in the database. To understand a little bit more on how actually Selenium interact with these elements, so you can write automation test, we need to understand a simple live example. So let's say you are in a classroom, and in that classroom there are 40 students. Usually the teacher comes every day in the morning and it passes attendance. So the teacher may go by asking each one of every student its name. So for instance, you can say Rafael, and then the student will say, hey, present. So similarly, Selenium looks or identifies certain attributes on a website, and that belongs to a particular element. So these attributes will be seen more in detail. So if you're wondering how to access this view, it's easy. So that's the developer tools, and most web browsers contains a developer tool. And what we're going to be focusing on is on this section here, which is the user name input text. So now this particular element contains different attributes, as I said. So one attribute can be the tag itself, which is type input. A different attribute is also the CSS class name, which basically contains the styling of the component in HTML. It also contains an attribute ID. Now, in Selenium, IDs are the best option to locate elements within a web page. Reason being is because IDs are unique identifiers within a website, and it's easier for Selenium to identify unique elements rather than trying to search for multiple elements that contains basically the same class name, for instance. Now, from time to time, you will find custom attributes. Don't get too scared. We will show you how to locate these custom attributes in later on more deep dive sessions when we start working about XPath. So don't worry too much about this for now. Cool. So I think it's enough for me talking, and let's get to doing some exercises. For this exercise, it's quite simple. I will ask you to go to sourcedemo.com, open developer tools, And if we find some errors, well, in this case, go to the console tab, and then we may find some errors in the console tab. Just ask you to clear it out, and then we're going to search for an element using JavaScript. Don't worry too much about if you know or don't know the syntax. Basically, we will be acting as Selenium, so that's for you to start making a mental concept about how Selenium works underneath, behind the scenes. Okay, so let's click on sourcedemo.com. Let the website load, and as I said, so I just press F12 in case you're wondering how do I get there. Most browser has this option, so you can go to more tools and then developer tools. So that's the option that we want to access. So now, as you can see here, it's displaying some errors or JavaScript errors. That's completely fine. We're just gonna get rid of them. And well, part of the exercise was to locate an element within the screen that we're seeing at the moment. So if you want to locate element, is easy as select an element. You can click on this icon here, and then as you hover on each one of the components of this website, it will tell you, or it will go exactly on the HTML site that the attributes of these elements are. So now, remember that we were talking about that the best way to locate element is by its ID. So we will be doing that just now. So the ID of the username element is basically username, correct? So let's copy that, go back to console, and let's type document. So I want you to notice something, like as soon as I type document, the whole site is highlighted. The reason being is because when I press document, that means that I am reading the entire content of the website, and then I will use this method to get element by ID. I will pass the username ID, and voila. So now we are having a more focused view on the different attributes of the username component. Let's try one more thing. Let's try to change or add a value to username. So for that, we're going to use .value, and we're going to assign a username. This user. So see how as soon as I assign a value, it basically displayed here as a test user. Let's do the same thing for the next element, which in this case is password. Let's locate the ID for password. Go back to console. Element my ID. Now password. Let's assign a random value to password. Random value. Cool. So now if I want to read the value of password, I can also do that by okay. So but this is not a complete test yet, right? So I need to click on the login button. Let's search for the ID of the login button. PHP. Now login button, that's the ID, and I want to execute an action. So in this case, by default, I have the click event. So I can call the click event, and finger crossed that will actually execute. Yeah, the action of clicking on the login button. So from time to time you may want to read the error message. So let's say we are doing a test on this component, we want to automate this test, this particular scenario of a failed user or password. So let's look at the error message that we have here. Okay, so if you look at this, we don't have an ID in this case, but we have a tag. Let's see if we can find this element by tag. Yeah, so we have tag name, and if you remember the tag name, that was h3, which is a header. Okay, looks like we have a collection of headers. Yeah, so and what it's doing here, so look, the keyword in this case is say element, so it's retrieving a list of elements of type that contains the attribute h3, which is a header. Let's get the first element on the list, and it's exactly what we are expecting. So that's our error. Let's see. I don't think I can print text content. There you go. So I can even read the text content of the h3 tag. So now we can take these actions and we potentially could start doing some automation. So now what I want from you is a challenge. So now you know how to identify different elements within a website. So try to play with the browser console and look for different elements that using different attributes, and see if you get the same result. Try to update the values of the user name and the password. You can put a valid user and a valid password and see what happened. If you can see on this website, you also have some username and a valid password, so you can run different scenarios. And finally, click on the login button and see what happened. So play around, try to understand a little bit more how to interact with the different components of a website, and I'll be waiting for you on our next session, where I will walk you through how to set up Selenium and using in Java. Okay, see you next time.